But we have to assume that we're all on the same page and we all have the same goals on the liberal side. And I am just of the mindset that the people who are churning out this rhetoric, these narratives, which is Center for American Progress, as we know very well. They have a very they're extremely influential when it comes to establishing these narratives with Neera Tanden in 2016, and the Women's March. The people who jumped on board with the Women's March as it started to grow, not the initial founders, were pushing for this rhetoric as they wanted to broaden their coalition of blaming white women, and all these things might be true, that white women were partially responsible and white men, but at the end of the day, it is not going to help us win. I mean, we know that blaming voters does not do anything to engage those voters the next time around. But there's a lot of money to be made in this type of rhetoric, not just money to be made in the industry of selling this propaganda, this bullshit, these narratives, but also just, the clicks. It's clickable, content on the internet. It's something that you could put on news shows all day long on the cable news. And it's something that if you're running for office, it's a great way for you to raise money. And that leads me to this question about AOC, because I respect AOC. I supported her. I live in that neighborhood normally I do. Right now I'm in Arizona. And I'm a little worried, like the whole Joe Rogan debacle was revealing, because I feel as if she may not be, and I'm only using her as an example because everybody knows who she is and follows every bit of information out there, that she's not broadening her base enough for somebody who is, number one, cosmopolitan, number two, represents a district that she won the white vote with. She didn't win. She did not win the black vote. She did not win the Latino vote. She won the white vote, the educated white vote. So she was speaking that language to a woke audience. But the groups that we need to build, we're not buying into that rhetoric. They were buying into, whatever it was that establishment rhetoric. I have no idea it was low turnout election. So
no, I think look, I don't know. I want to give her a lot of the benefit of the doubt, like you do. But I also think, specifically if the reporting about her being upset that Bernie Sanders' campaign heralded the Joe Rogan endorsement is true, that's a really big problem. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's actually a really great distilled example of okay, first of all, in the terrain of the world, particularly in politics, you're going to have to deal with, build coalitions with, and work around people you have disagreements with. Mm-hmm. Secondly, Joe Rogan is, and I'm not a big, I'm not excited about deplatforming and all of that, but even if you were, it's just irrelevant. Look, The View is disgusting. And by the way, The View is infinitely more damaging to the prospects of working people than Joe Rogan ever is. Joe Rogan has way more concern for people's well-being than anybody on The View. So let's be very clear about that. Mm-hmm. But I'm not saying cancel The View. The View is there.
Yeah.
The View is there. It's part of the landscape. Joe Rogan is there. It's part of the landscape. So the idea that the response to the most popular podcaster, YouTube person on earth, mm-hmm. with millions and millions and millions and millions of people, to tune it out,
right,
or not herald it, that's just, again, it's just not, it's just anti-politics. I can't indulge that for a second. And thirdly, I also think it's really important. It's I'm saying that principle applies to something like The View, which I think is absolutely disgusting and has very few redeeming qualities. Mm-hmm. Whereas Joe Rogan has plenty of redeeming qualities, right? He does. If you watch it, he's spoken out. Look, there's a reason he supported Bernie Sanders. He's got plenty of redeeming qualities. But I'm saying, he is the new center. That's the center. That is, and in fact, he's part of the dark web thing.
Wait. This is just a side. I think I told you this. My aunt, who watches The View, was citing CDC statistics from the Joe Rogan show to me, and I was like, "This is really fascinating." As a political scientist, a wannabe political scientist, is listening to her articulate where she's getting her information from The View, and that's why she supports Biden.
Yep.
But also from Joe Rogan.
Also from Joe Rogan.
I mean, it was mind-blowing.
Joe Rogan is the center. And again, even if you look at his look, he's interviewed sympathetically plenty of people I hate. He's interviewed sympathetically people I love, Cornel West, right, Bernie Sanders. And the way he usually comes down on politics, even when is interesting. Because again, I would really be very clear that, like, mostly, not always, but mostly, the objection is going to be on tone, style, and discourse stuff, and almost never what he's actually saying. So, like, his actual sort of policy sets. Now, so
where does that go with AOC? I mean, in terms of
that's
her platform, how do we make sure this generation is not falling for the same, it's the same mistakes, frankly, over and over again.
Yeah.
And I think if you're coming from New York City, Cosmopolitan, you're more vulnerable to making these mistakes in politics because of the way electoral politics works in major cities where most young people are living right now.
Well, I'd want to make the way I want to use that word, because that word means so much, so many things that suck, but part of me resonates with it, is actually just somebody who is really able to move and translate between very different environments. So I think that if somebody can, do diplomacy in the Middle East, talk to Joe Rogan, go to an Audre Lorde festival and then a Knick game, that's is like I think having a real broad ability to have a certain type of empathy and a certain type of intellectual fluidity, as well as really understanding in a socialist sense, just the obvious shared bonds when it comes to the economy, which drives everything, right? So I think look, AOC and the broader movement and environment around her, I just think ultimately needs to decide, like, AOC can be a super successful, and dynamic congressperson who represents a district and represents a certain constituency. And that can be fine. That's important. There's people who play that role. I see a lot of people wanting her to be a state and national figure. Mm-hmm. I think in terms of her talent, in terms of her tenacity, she could be. That's my read. She has a huge amount of talent as a political figure. My problem and concern is like, she's unpopular if you look at the poll numbers. Mm-hmm. And, I know
nationally she's unpopular.
Yeah. Of course, look, has Fox News been trashing her? Is there a media war? Absolutely. No doubt about it. And at the same time, people should also recognize that she also gets a fair amount of favorable coverage, and she's also has a massive independent platform. And so it's not just because she's getting demonized. It's not just because there's reactionary politics. It's because the way she's messaging, the way she's talking right now is not a national message. And it's not me for me to say. I don't know what the intention is. I don't know what the goal is. But if people want her to be a presidential contender or a Senate contender, then they need to start really radically rethinking not the policy positions, but the messaging and what's actually coming across. Because the messaging right now is for a very narrow subset. And the last thing I'd say too is I think is another really big mistake that the left makes, that I can't believe they're still making, which is, and it comes up all the time in AOC discourse. Yes, she's got a certain credibility with her base. By the way, I would say she needs to watch that credibility, particularly on things like foreign policy.
Very much so. Yeah.
And that's just being real and stop standing and stop canceling people in general. That's right. I'm so fucking sick of that. Everybody are really like, there's very, 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 very few people, including people who've made big mistakes, who deserve to be like excommunicated or whatever. Like even Elizabeth Warren is somebody like, I want her to be punished politically, but I don't want her to like not be able to make a living or whatever. Right?
We can't talk about restorative justice on one hand and cancel people for bullshit on the other hand.
And cancel
empathy is universal.
Absolutely. And by the way, even things where people have made actual legitimate mistakes and are changing.
I mean, look at those remember the South Carolina shootings in the church. The families in that church who got up days afterwards and said, we pray for this person. And, our church doesn't teach us to demonize and to punish. And ways. We want this person to grow. I'm not saying the person's name because, we know,
Yeah.
but that is the politics, I think, that we all on the left, that's our core, but it gets lost along the way. And so I think there's a lot of
no, I
power in
totally
that.
agree. It becomes like a religious cult. And the thing is, like, I look at that and it's not for me to say at that level. Obviously, we can't say what anybody's reaction could be, but I look at that and I think that's the ideal. That's actually what we should be working towards, and certainly reflect. And then on the flip side, I like AOC. I'm going to criticize her, and people need to not have fucking whiny meltdowns when I say she's had trash positions on Venezuela. She's been shaky on any number of issues. So I guess I just end with, okay, but I'll say this real quick. People on the left are so stuck in their heads that the only thing that needs to be reconciled is like essentially people who are, I guess, identify as socialists, but basically kind of like beefed up liberals, and then like other kinds of liberals. And so they look at AOC and they go like, oh, she endorsed Bernie, but they like her on The View. Mm-hmm. And that is not like, that isn't even a majority of the Democratic Party electorate. So I think there's a really big problem that people still don't seem to get, that the playing field is much, much bigger than they realize. And I don't want to make, and I think the Democratic establishment is very comfortable with that frame, because they really basically just want people to be like, look, you've got absolute troglodytes who vote for Trump, and they're all just this undifferentiated, massive evil, and there's nothing even to talk about. We certainly have nothing to do with the economy or anything else. And then you have all of us. I'm like, sure, like we've got our disagreements and gaping holes in life experience, but we're all just generally the good people. And that's not what it is. Like inside the Democratic electorate, I think you could think of maybe like 4 or 5 or 6 electorates inside the Democratic Party. And people are still really fixated on this idea that like, oh, well, AOC, she would get the Warren people and the Bernie people. Guess what? The Warren people and the Bernie people are about 35%, 37%.
That's right.
So talent and capacity wise, I'm sure she's there. But if she and they want it to be national, a little bit more Bernie 2016.
That's right.
And a little bit, more of a kind of much broader message. And even I would say when you're talking about, other areas, like I think the discourse should reflect wanting to reach a much broader set of people.
Yeah. And I think building coalitions, just as we wrap it up right now, I noticed this in the beginning, we all have to navigate our political worlds, and New York is just a cesspool of corruption, left and right, and you still have to deal with the lawmakers in your district. And it doesn't mean that you partnered with them on things. And I think that's what concerns a lot of folks, is bringing in staff that have experience needed on the left. We don't have experience on the left because we're not a large enough universe yet. We haven't had enough people elected, and it's a new, it's a movement that's growing, and a lot of young people are involved that don't have experience, but doesn't mean that you go and you bring in people from Kamala Harris's office who may not have the same morals. I feel like we could talk about this forever. I have so many other points. My only point I'm going to throw out at the end is there's a lot of money in this. There's a lot of money in being provocative. There are a lot of Twitter followers. That does not translate to movements being built. It's the only time I'll ever say, because it helped me in my race, my Twitter following, but it helped me raise the money. It helped me recruit volunteers. It helped me get on the ballot. It helped me get on the debate stage. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to get our messages out to communities that don't naturally hear them, and make sure that message is relatable to all, which is, I think, the point of your show, and really the message that you put out there every day. So, Michael, thank you.
Thank you.
Book is at where are all the places we can buy against the web?
Well, you can buy it
to the new right.
You can buy it everywhere, and I would buy it at Red Emma's in Baltimore.
Yes, and when they're back open, definitely go there. It's they have an amazing restaurant, bookstore. Spend hours there. It's great.
I love it.
Michael, come back.
Of course.
Or come to Arizona. I mean, we're going to build a commune here. I don't think you guys know. We're building a leftist media commune here.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare. I've already told you how I feel about this idea.
There's a pool.
I like the pool part.
It's from the 60s.
The pool part is good.
I built a studio that's not occupied like 3/4 of the time, so you can come here and do your show. You can even change the lights behind.
I
so
like all
theme.
the rest of it. All the rest of it. This commune thing.
I don't know. It's just, what else are we going to call it? It's like when the Silicon Valley guys went up to those houses in Silicon Valley and lived there for like 4 months to build and like lived off of Adderall and pizza and built their apps.
That also doesn't sound fun.
No, it sounds horrifying.
No, Nomiki, I am going, if you put me in charge of the selection process, be extremely hard to get into.
Yes. We only have a few rooms, so.
Yes, that's right. Space is limited.
Space is limited and food's limited. So if you can cook, even better.
We'll weight your application that way.
We'll weight your application. All right.
All right. Thanks a million,
Michael.
Nomiki.
Thank you. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Stay home. Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
I will. Bye-bye.